Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Doctor is in series. This is episode 285. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social Engineer, LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation and Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. And this month on the Doctor is in series, we have two doctors. But let's introduce our co-host here first, Dr. Abbie Maroño. Thanks for being here with me today.
Great to be here, Chris. I'm Dr. Abbie Maroño. I'm a behavioral scientist and the Director of Education at Social Engineer. I have a PhD in psychology specialized in behavioral analysis, and I'm an expert in nonverbal communication, behavioral analysis, and human decision making.
And you're a behavioral psychologist, right? Just kidding.
One
just
more
kidding.
person calls me a psychologist. I will.
I'm just kidding.
I'm going to start bringing my PhD around.
Just showing people. Yeah. We can laminate it, make it like a driver's license.
Well, actually, there's a PhD in psych, so people are like, yeah, psychologist.
Yeah, I know. That's why everyone keeps messing it up. That's what we were talking about before the show, hence the joke. So as always, this episode is sponsored by our company, Social Engineer. A couple exciting things. So this is coming out in December. It's the end of the year. Can you believe that? We're hitting 2025. And if you just think back for the last 12 months of this year, what have we seen? Non-stop breaches. It's literally been non-stop. And vishing has taken a 550% increase. So as we're starting 2025, if you and your company are thinking, how can we possibly be protected against vishing scams? Then give us a call. Go check out social-engineer.com. See our customized vishing service and see what we can do to help your organization learn about this threat and stay secure from it. If you like the topic of social engineering, you should check out our Slack channel. We keep growing each and every month with thousands of people in there talking about all aspects of social engineering. It is a family-friendly and legal chat, so if that sounds like you should come on in. We discuss everything from just the psychology behind it. People that do it for a living or asking for help with pretext and everything in between. So come check it out. I think you'll really like it, and you can find the link in the show notes. If not, just hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'll gladly get you that link. Also, I want to invite everyone here take a moment to go visit innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with that nonprofit, it is started 7 years ago, just about 7.5 years, if you can believe that. And our mission is to work closely with law enforcement around the globe to help geolocate and apprehend people who traffic children and create child abuse material. And I got to tell you, I'm so proud. I know this is coming out a little bit later, but as of now, we're over 530 cases that we've worked on in those 7.5 years. I can't be prouder of the team there. The work that they do is unbelievable. And not only that, not just the work on the cases, but we have a lot of volunteers like Dr. Abbie who come in and write articles or even books or other things to help people learn about this threat, learn how they can deal with the trauma, and learn how they can help young people stay clear from these type of threat actors. So go check out innocentlivesfoundation.org if you want to see what we're doing. If you want to support us, we definitely can use the help financially. So you can donate and you can volunteer your time. Those are two ways you can support us. And if you like the music at the beginning of this episode, and at the end, it is none other than the band Clutch. Go check out clutchmerch.com. Everyone knows us already, but I'm going to say it anyway in case this is your first time here. The lead singer, Neil Fallon, he helped me start the ILF 7.5 years ago. I've been a fan of his since I was 17. So that dude's awesome. The music is awesome. Go check them out. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up, a like, and please, please, please keep your ideas coming in, either through email or on the comments about what other topics you want to hear. That helps Abbie and I really plan for future episodes. So keep that up. Thank you for all your comments, too. They're really nice and kind. Now let me introduce our second doctor in the Doctor is In series. Really excited to have Dr. Brent Hogarth. He is a clinical psychologist and is a distinguished clinical and sports psychologist and a founder of FlowRx, specializing in high-performance psychology. He has worked with elite athletes, corporate executives, and entrepreneurs to unlock their full potential through developing greater mindfulness, emotional regulation, and executive functioning. With a doctorate in clinical psychology and a master's in sports psychology, Dr. Hogarth has coached over 1,000 executives at Flow Research Collective and in his private clinical practice. He authored a groundbreaking dissertation. It's entitled The Dark Side of Flow, which highlights the lesser-known negative consequences of flow state and how to achieve controlled peak performance. Dr. Brent, it's really great to have you here.
My pleasure, Chris. And Dr. Abbie, thank you for having me here. Super interested and curious to see where this conversation unfolds, and certainly hope it's helpful for all the listeners. So thank you so much.
No problem. Let's start off with the question I always ask when we have a guest on the show, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Like, how did you get to this point where you're doing high performance psychology?
Yeah, So I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I was a provincial, what would be considered in the United States, a state gymnast, so high-level competitive gymnast. I was also a total out-of-control youth. When I left gymnastics, left kind of organized sports, I was a graffiti artist, a break dancer. I was in and out of court multiple times for fights, eventually sent to a military school, type of military school where, you know, they strip you down, shave your head, have you face a wall when you first walk in, really try to break you down and build you back up, and in the middle of nowhere, so that if you tried to run away, you weren't getting very far. And so, you know, that was a result of, you know, really struggling academically, struggling behaviorally, and needing that structure, needing that discipline. And it provided the opportunity to graduate high school, go into college. And really what started my path, though, Chris, was like for many of us, a good heartbreak had me become conscious and aware, and a moment of pain inspired me to change. So after college, during that heartbreak, I remember just not really liking who I saw in the mirror at that point, and seeking, I wouldn't have this language back then, but self-acceptance. And I remember going into churches, reading different books. One book that really stood out to me was a Wayne Dyer book, a small little book, 7 Secrets to Inner Peace and Happiness, you know, full with, if your listeners know, Rumi quotes and Hafez quotes and these Eastern philosophies that just lit me up. Led me to a Deepak Chopra retreat, which then led me to India. And at 21, I was doing a yoga teacher training course up near the Himalayan mountains. I was living in a Buddhist monastery. And I remember the whole time the nun simply saying to me, Buddha is just a cognitive behavioral therapist. He's simply saying that you are the boss of your thoughts. And it was at that moment, you know, through that teaching, but even more so in meditation, that I realized that that part of me I was trying to accept, this story, this narrative of my past, my sense of self, was really a story, was really a thought that would come and go. And in that moment of kind of having space between it, I realized that that path of trying to accept it, I didn't need to kind of go through that journey anymore. It was kind of a false refuge, so to speak. And that gave me the flexibility to think about, how do I want to live my life differently? If I don't need to protect this old ego, build it up, forgive it, whatever it might be, and I can start afresh, what are some new values that would be important to me? And how can I pursue that in alignment? And so that led me, going full circle now, to enter the Master's in Sport Psych, Doctorate in Clinical Psychology, of all places in San Francisco. Lived in a hippie collective with 25 burners. We'd go to Burning Man together. And the whole time, I just studied flow state. So I studied the zone. What was happening for me when I was locked in gymnastics, when I was in a street fight, when I was painting graffiti up on a train or a billboard, when I was locked in academically? What was going on in my brain, so under the hood, so to speak? And how could mindfulness and meditation in particular, which was so helpful for me, help me optimize for flow and protect against that negative dark side of flow, which I've kind of alluded to, I knew very, very well. And so that was my kind of education, informal, formal. And then I worked in a couple of university counseling centers, D1 centers, working with students, student athletes, built some sports psych programs at these universities. And then the last 4 years or so, I worked with a global company with New York Times author Stephen Kotler at the Flow Research Collective, really training stress executives on how to have their neurobiology work for them, not against them. Help them get into flow so they can be more productive in their workplace and have more time and freedom in their personal lives. And so I really mastered, in some regard, that craft of working with stress executives. And I've leveraged that now in my private practice, working with executives, a lot of men with ADHD and women, and really specializing in optimizing for flow. So that's a long story. Hopefully some of that makes sense, is intriguing.
No,
to you guys.
It's wonderful, actually. It's a really amazing story. You mentioned this word in your bio, but also you said it a number of times here. You talked about something called flow. Mm-hmm. That's not a familiar word to me. So can you tell maybe myself and the audience who doesn't know what that is, what you're actually talking about?
So when we think of flow, think about being in the zone. Think about runner's high. Think about being in the groove, being in the pocket, locked in, unconscious. Flow state is the scientific term for those moments where we become fully absorbed into the moment, into a task, and often feel and perform at our best. So again, there's a very interesting and well-studied neuroscience of when we're in a flow state. So it's not just a subjective state. There's real hardcore science behind it, and therefore specific ways that we can train up to get more locked in, more engaged, and ultimately lead to greater peak performance.
It's like when you're reading a book. I always shy away from reading fiction because I tend to feel like I'm wasting my time if I'm not learning, which is a terrible mindset. But when you're reading a fiction book more than any other, you get into that flow state, and there becomes a point where you're almost not reading, where you forget that you're turning the pages, and you're so deep in that flow state that everything else disappears, and it's almost just like you're watching a film in your mind. And then it's when you kind of come out of it that you realize you're reading again, and it feels almost out of body because you are so focused, yet not focused, because you're just playing it out, but your attention is so deeply focused on that book, but because you're in that mental state, it takes you out of it completely.
Absolutely. And one of the facets of flow that you're really pointing to there, Dr. Abbie, is that when we're fully absorbed in reading, let's say, the sense of self disappears, right? And there's interesting neuroscience called, technical term here, transient hypofrontality. So transient meaning temporary, hypo, down, frontality, the frontal cortex. So there's a temporary down regulation of a lot of the executive functioning areas that store a sense of self. And so, as Plato said, and this is really the opening quote in my dissertation, the first and greatest victory is to conquer oneself. And so when we're in flow, we transcend the self, so to speak, conquer it. And that is typically when we feel at our best, perform at our best. And exactly like you said, there is this feature of flow where time seems to speed up or slow down. Think about a car accident you may have gone into, or a ski backcountry you may have done where you had to be really present. And then there's this sense of action and awareness merging. So we become one with the book, one with the poem we're writing, one with our partner as we have this deep conversation, which is just one other layer I want to add into when we think about flow. Finding flow individually is fun. It's amazing benefits we'll get into. But finding flow interpersonally and as a team or as a group, that's where amazing magic happens. And again, there's very fascinating neuroscience that when we're, so to speak, in sync with other people, our brainwaves sync up, our breathing syncs up, our heart rate syncs up. And when we think about pro-social behaviors, empathy, collaboration, trust, all those go through the roof. So flow is an individual experience, but also a group or even collective experience.
I think that's so interesting about this syncing up, because I think, there's new research that's come out that when we do spend a lot of time with someone, our microbiomes almost sync together also. And non-verbally, we know we become very similar. And in my head, I'm picturing that, for example, interpersonal relationships, when you're in a romantic moment, maybe a new partner, and you start to get to know each other. And it's that you have those deep conversations and time really disappears, and you look and it's been hours and hours and you've just been in that deep connected state. And I love the way you described it as that almost neurosyncing, where everything else, every other factor really dissipates.
Yeah. The technical term would be interpersonal synchrony or interbrain synchrony.
Dr. Brent, everything you just said sounds amazing, but you also said there's a dark side to flow. So I need to understand that, because, as the only non-PhD in this conversation, I need to understand, what is the bad side of all that? Because I feel like if I can get that, I can probably reduce 99% of the stress in my life, which is about, 2000% of my life right now. So
yeah.
what's the bad side?
Thanks for asking. And again, I came into this honestly with knowing the dark side of flow very well. And I'll give you the first kind of glimpse I had into the dark side of flow was I was reading a book called Transcendental Moments in Sport, I believe, by Michael Murphy. If anyone knows the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California, he was really one of the leaders in the human potential movement, Michael Murphy. So the dark side of flow, as this quote mentioned, was these athletes would go from these huge peak moments. He was speaking about football players in particular, these peak mystical flow moments. And then they'd leave the sport and their life would be in chaos. And he described it as they did not have a workable philosophy to put these peak transcendent states into how do they integrate this into their day-to-day life. So that was kind of the genesis for me, like, oh, this sounds familiar to me. What the science actually shows and what I found in studying the dark side of flow is that the dark side of flow is how flow state, and I think particularly that sense of a loss of self-awareness and the complete sense of control you have when you're in flow can lead to a loss of self-control, right? Because you're so absorbed, you're so engaged that what you're doing, you're feeling and performing so well that you don't think about the long-term consequences of your actions. So you think about big wave surfers, they need a bigger and bigger wave because the key to flow is when your skills are matched to the challenge. So as you get better at surfing, you need a bigger wave. And so that's why flow leads to so much growth and development, but how it can lead to impaired risk perception, putting yourself at a loss of self-control risk. Dark side of flow is it's also incredibly addictive. Think video game addiction. Video game people are locked in flow state. We haven't gone to the neuroscience, but essentially you get hit with really the most addictive neurochemical cocktail of dopamine, norepinephrine, and anandamide. This is an endocannabinoid, like smoking a little joint. You get hit with serotonin and oxytocin on the back end of a flow state. So it's incredibly addictive state. So again, you're losing control, you're lost in it, you want to do it more and more. And then also you go from these huge highs, as I started off saying, to these huge lows. And so you can start to seek flow in ways that aren't leading to a good life. And unfortunate reality is flow you can get into very easy when you take high risk situations. And so there's a dark side of having to manage, again, how flow can lead to a loss of self-control.
And I'm also thinking just in terms of the mental health aspect, we do know, for example, when individuals go and do concerts or parades or big speeches, they get this big high. And then afterwards, there's reports of individuals committing suicide or going into really deep depressions because they do have that strong dopamine hit. And then once that washes away, in comparison, everything feels empty. And you can see that after a very, very, say, toxic relationship or an up-down relationship, intense relationship, once that goes, you lose a sense of self. Or workaholics, people who are workaholics, say they lose their job. This huge aspect of who they are is now gone, and they don't get that dopamine reward. So you can see on the mental health side of things why it could lead to this feeling of just emptiness. And it's that emptiness and loss of purpose and loss of passion that can really make you feel like, well, what's the point? Because this thing that I was so deeply diving into and overwhelmed with emotionally, now it's gone. And we know when we have these huge ups, what's inevitable is a huge down.
So I want to just build off what Abbie shared there is, again, I started off my dissertation with the first and greatest victory is to conquer oneself. And so in flow state, we conquer the self by becoming so absorbed and engaged in it, where I looked at how to manage that huge high in the self and the crashing through conquering the self through another path that's more controllable, attainable in any moment, where flow is very difficult to enter, which is mindfulness. I know you've all done a lot of research and exploration of mindfulness. So mindfulness being learning to let go of the contents of our thinking, the attachment to the self. And so there's a way to find a deeper flow state, so to speak, where we can experience that transcendence after that rock concert where we're feeling that crashing. And that's really where some of the crux of my work comes in, is helping people, yes, enter flow, but also oftentimes manage when they're not in flow. And that one piece you hit there, Abbie, Dr. Abbie, around workplace burnout. It's so important, is that there is that you feel this growth of the self after a flow state. You feel stronger, you feel more competent, more complex, so to speak, and it's addictive. And so this can lead, part of the dark side of flow, to overwork and burnout. So I really wanted to add that in, Chris, and please jump in there.
No, that's a really valuable point. That I think you kind of just called me out publicly. So, I think the overworking part, is like, I really enjoy what I do, and I'm not being arrogant, but I'm really good at what I do. Mm-hmm. So I tend to do it a lot because I'm not really good at other things. So instead of going out of this room and doing things that I'm really crappy at, I'm going to stay here and do this 22 hours a day, right?
Exactly.
It's not a healthy way. And that's
the thing with flow. It's an intrinsically motivated. Csikszentmihalyi, the founder of flow theory, he called it an autotelic experience. So auto meaning self, telic goal. So it's a goal in and of itself, which again, why it's so beneficial. We get intrinsically motivated. We want to work just for the sake of it. We want to paint because we find joy in it. I relate to you, Chris. And the last thing I just want to share is that flow we only get into when we're engaged in a goal, right? When we're engaged in work and sport and a purposeful conversation. And so, there's a piece here around how the best moments in our life tend to be the moments where we're stretched, where we're challenged towards a meaningful goal. And so it makes sense that we want to overwork or just dedicate our lives to accomplishing some meaningful challenge. So I'm just level setting with you, and I think we could all probably relate to that,
Because it made me think about what Abbie was saying is I used to surf when I was a kid, and then I moved up to Pennsylvania. And if you don't know anything about Pennsylvania, there's no oceans anywhere nearby. So I had that depression that Dr. Abbie was talking about. Was like that. I went to the beach every day, even if there was no waves. I was at the beach every day, even just to be in the ocean. I was in love with it. And then all of a sudden I'm in a place where I can't get to the ocean in under 4 hours. And I'm like, this is the worst place on the planet Earth, and it did all the things that I did for dopamine were gone. And I had to figure that out. And that was not an easy fix, but like, I think your experience, on the other side, I met a woman that now is my wife. So, women always change everything for us, right? It's either a breakup or a relationship. And then that creates a whole new pathway. So it makes me think of that.
To follow up, I found in my research of mindfulness that self-talk was such a powerful tool, the way we talk to ourselves, and especially in sports. And there was research showing that when we have positive self-talk, it increases performance. When we tell ourselves, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, it actually increases cortisol. So it gets us in a lower performance ability as well as a lower mental state. In terms of coming out of flow state and balancing that mental health aspect, is there any role of self-talk and, say, self-compassion in being able to help us use the benefits without suffering from those negatives?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking the question. And I want to go right to self-compassion. Now, I'll start off with, firstly, what is self-compassion? It's the ability to recognize that the challenges that we're experiencing in life are pretty normal, whether it's anxiety, depression, failures in sport and academic. It's normalizing, feeling a sense of common humanity. First, being aware of those thoughts, then normalizing them, feeling a sense of connection in our challenges. And then thirdly, still saying words of kindness to ourselves. Saying words of, hey, I believe in your ability to bounce back. I love you even though you've struggled to not procrastinate on this task. It's learning to motivate ourselves from a healthy ambition that we just want ourselves to do well, not needing to just prove ourselves or be better than other people. The research behind self-compassion shows that it helps boost resilience, helps boost maintaining high standards and expectations, which a lot of people think the opposite. If we're too kind, we might be lazy. That's not the case. And so that's what self-compassion is. And again, I want to just share a story for me. So I had a son 9 months ago, and when I've been rocking my son, especially in the first few months, and soothing him, right? I'd be humming, I'd be bouncing, saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I'd have these moments where, to be honest, the most similar state I'd been in was probably when I was doing MDMA, some MDMA therapy, but just the sense of love, of connection, of warmth, of feeling just so content and at peace. It was really new to me. And all I was doing was saying really kind, warm things. And I realized my whole life, whether it was in academics, in relationships, in professional pursuits, in running Ironmans or 100 marathons, I was doing it always through beating myself up. And while that can work in some contexts, especially athletics, the adrenaline rush can work. When it comes to, achieving long-term goals, truly having a sense of self-control, it's not the path to sustain peak performance. And so that's where, for me, Dr. Abbie, when it comes to how do we manage the dark side of flow, if we can even just do this one exercise, and the listeners are, have a pen and paper, it's a simple practice by Dr. Kristen Neff. I love it. It's a foundation in my work with clients. It's called a self-compassion break. If you were to write that down as the title on your page, and number 1, you just write down mindfulness. Spend 2 minutes writing about all the stressful thoughts you're having about not being in flow. Let's say, I feel empty, I feel lost, I feel not productive. Write all of that down. So what we're doing there is we're shifting from a state where we're identified with our thoughts, so to speak, in our head and out of our life, to being mindful of them, seeing them on the page, essentially kind of reducing our cognitive load, how much information we're storing in our head. So that's number 1, mindfulness. Number 2, as I alluded to earlier, common humanity. Write about how all the other athletes or top performers or whomever also struggle with moments when they're not in flow, where they have moments where they're struggling, where they're procrastinating, where they might have depression. And write to yourself how all of those are common to the human experience. They're natural, right? Anxiety, depression. These are common things. We don't need to feel a sense of isolation, which only more jacks up our fight or flight and cortisol, as you're saying, Dr. Abbie, and makes it harder to perform. And then thirdly, kindness. Write out to yourself. And for a lot of people, this step and the last feel very unnatural. Write for a couple minutes, words of support, comfort, care for yourself, wanting yourself to be well. And I'll summarize, for me, this practice goes all the way back when I was living in India and studying Gandhi and some of his movement called Satyagraha. Anyway, he talked about as the means, so the ends. So the means to which we achieve the goals in our life, if we approach those ends through means that, are critical, right? If we're beating ourselves the whole way, if that's our means to achieve a happy life, we'll never arrive there. Even when we achieve the goal of the house, the partner, the car, whatever it might be, if we've been self-critical to ourselves, we're only going to arrive at more self-criticalness. And it's so simple to say that and so simple not to practice it. But it's the reality is our thinking now is a result of how we've thought before, and we can take control of that and positively self-talk to us now, and the benefits to our performance and our well-being, it makes all the difference. Nothing can soothe us like we can soothe ourselves through our own words.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point about the goal not being a specific thing, because we say, well, I'll be happy when I achieve this. I'll be happy when I get this. But then what happens is we get it, but our perspective now changes because it becomes relative. So it's no longer this unobtainable thing that we think, once I get it, I will mean something, because our entire life is now shifted in that direction. So it becomes again relative. So you go, okay, well, now I need this bigger goal because I'll be important when I get this. And it's going to be continuous. And I had that realization recently when I stopped and I thought, well, I have everything I've ever wanted in my career. I'm doing everything, every single career goal I've ever set out for myself, I've achieved. But I sat down and thought, I'm not happy. I'm in a dream apartment, in a dream location, in a dream job, but I'm not happy. And it was that realization, maybe the goal isn't a thing, maybe it isn't a place, maybe it's all about mindset. And when we do shift that and we realize, well, why aren't I happy? And I really had to sit down and think about, well, how do I talk to myself? And it's always do more, work harder, be better, you're not enough. And that switching from you're doing well, you can do more if you want to, but you're doing a great job, that feels really unnatural. But just that simple change, starting to speak to yourself better. And I think I remember I had a conversation with Chris a few months ago, and I said, I'm really proud of myself for this thing. And I never really say that. And he was like, yes, we've reached there. We've got it. I'm so proud of you for being proud of you. And it was that change. And from changing that perspective, everything changed. My entire outlook on life, and very quickly too. Once you learn to shift that mindset, you bring it to every other aspect, and you realize, I don't need that handbag to be important. I don't need to have achieved that goal or reach this status or have that many likes or do this thing to matter. I simply matter because I deserve to matter. And I really think that listeners will benefit from that understanding of, it's about the mindset. It's not about the goal, like you said. And that number 2 point, being vulnerable, I think that is so powerful once we start speaking about our fears and about our mistakes too. And I know, Chris, you speak openly about mistakes you've made in cybersecurity. And I see students in cybersecurity go, that you see this breath of relief, like, oh, I did that thing and it doesn't make me an idiot, because someone who is an expert in this, they did it too. And they learned from it and they became better. So just simply talking about mistakes we've made in our humanity and vulnerability has such a powerful effect.
Dr. Brent, that exercise that you gave, would you recommend that as a team building exercise?
Oh yeah, that would be beautiful. Absolutely. That's a great idea. I've never actually done it with a team, but I do it in couples relationship. And we actually do it talking about the relationship itself. So what are all the negative, stressful thoughts we've had about our relationship? What are the ways that this is number 2, common humanity? How is this similar to other people's relationships, et cetera, et cetera? 3, let's write out some positive, affirming things about us as a couple. What's our hopes and dreams? Let's write out belief, and then they share it with each other. And so you could definitely do the same thing with a team. That would be one hell of a way to get people into group flow state. Absolutely.
I was thinking about it because without getting too deep into it, our company has been through a pretty hard couple years, to say the least. We had an insider threat incident that really rocked the foundation of the everything in this company, and the people that are here have stuck it out through that whole thing. And in October, we're doing our first team event in 3 years, because just the way it rocked our foundation, we didn't have the ability to. And I've been racking my brain thinking of something that we can do on that Thursday morning together. And as you started saying that, I actually got goosebumps, because when you were going through the outline, I'm thinking to myself, this is screw this planning for future financial success. We're going to do this, because this is how do we get through that time, that unimaginable stress was because these people all loved the mission. It wasn't because they were getting paid more. It wasn't because they had bonuses coming out of their pockets. It was because they loved the mission. And now I want to reward that by doing something this awesome with them. That just sounded amazing, but I didn't want to overstep if it wasn't a good team exercise. I didn't know if that's why I wanted to ask if that's something
amazing.
you suggest.
I love it, Chris. And a way to again, engenders a sense of self-compassion, to boost resilience, to boost, connectedness. I love that as a practice. I think it would land really, really well. And, the reality is I don't know if this is your experience, Chris, but oftentimes when I make a mistake, my go-to is to find the first wall I can hit my head against. That's how it kind of feels. Like I can say some pretty nasty things, probably worse things that I'd ever say to anyone else, even if I don't like them.
Yeah.
And so self-compassion teaches us, as opposed to wanting to hit ourselves in the head against the wall, it's like, let me hold my own hand here. Let me feel a sense of like warmth, connection, appreciation, and like help kind of walk with my own self, kind of maybe even pull it sometimes through those hard things. And again, my whole practice changed after having a son, because I recognized how easily we can get caught in the trap of beating ourselves up to achieve our goals. And so many of my clients are some of the most successful people in their craft. But if they don't have that foundation of self-compassion, they're always seeking for more. They're never fully satisfied. And while there's benefits to that, it can lead to a lot of suffering unnecessary in life. So please do that exercise. Let's follow up more about if it could, how I can maybe support you guys in doing that.
That would be amazing.
And I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it because, I tell you personally, and Abbie knows this, I always admit all of my psychological flaws on this podcast, but I'm terrible at self-compassion. I mean, I've been terrible about it my whole life. I will more gladly tell you every failure I've done in the last 5 minutes than mention a success. Right. And so I need to work on that. Like personally, I need to work on that. Right. And then be an example to the team and even my family, because now sadly I see those traits in my adult children. Right. So I had 2 children also. And just like you, it changes your life when you have a child. All of a sudden you look down and there's this human that you're responsible for that you helped create. And it's like, what just happened? Right. And it's like that moment, everything changes. It's an unbelievable feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and let me just share very quickly some of the science behind self-compassion that I think is very simple, and people will really start to kind of put some of the pieces together here. So Paul Gilbert has a model called the 3 circles model of emotion regulation. Think to yourself 3 circles. Okay. So the bottom left circle, let's say it's red. Let's call this the fight or flight. Okay. And then let's have a circle at the top. Let's call this let's call this a green circle. And this is drive. Okay. So fight or flight, we all know what that is. Drive is getting things done, getting into flow, taking action, moving towards our goals. Okay. And most of us live our life. Everything first comes through the fight or flight system. This is our default mode. Understandably, even though it's wrong 99% of the time, that one time it's right and it saves our life, it's going to be adaptive. We've evolved to always look out for the potential threats. Okay. So recognizing that, and then how do we typically move from fight or flight to drive mode? Okay. Let me get things done because I feel insecure or feel like I haven't done enough or whatever it might be. So we live our life ping-ponging through the state of fight or flight to let me get things done. Let me achieve something. Never getting to this 3rd circle. I think, let's say it's green, I think. Let's call it the soothing system. Okay, so the soothing system is obviously the rest and digest. This is the ability to feel safe, secure in the present moment. So how these all come together is, yes, things are going to come through our fight or flight, but if we don't initially knee-jerk to trying to get things done, to being critical on ourselves, and if we can just hover in this soothing space, practice self-compassion, do breath work, think of a few good things. We regulate our nervous system so that we can then enter that drive mode, getting things done, taking action with better decision-making, better problem solving, more resilience, prevent the problems that often come when we come from a fight or fight place. So that's how some of the science all comes together. And I find that really, really helpful to just kind of layer that in there.
I honestly think I could spend the rest of the afternoon talking to you about this, but I promised you that we would keep it. I said between 35 and 40 and we're already over, but this is truly fascinating. Really, really. I did not know what we were getting into when I saw the notes come in, and this is wonderful.
And there's so much more as well that I know that you have expertise in that I'd love to speak about. So hopefully we get to do this again. I
think we should do it again. I think we should definitely do this again.
Well, I gave him a choice in the matter.
Yeah, no,
I would love to.
I did not.
I would love to. I'd love to spend more time with you guys. Chris, I didn't get too much into it, but I'm a pretty open book and it's so healing. We are as sick as our secrets. So to learn that's how you live your life. And, I love to, stay connected with both of you. And this has been super fun. And again, to the audience, I hope this is something has landed with you that's of value, a thought, a seed. If you guys would like, I'd love people to feel welcome to reach out to me anytime if you have a follow-up question or thought.
I'm just going to add a shameless plug in terms of being a vulnerable open book. I just published a book called Work in Progress, which is an open book about all of my past mistakes and the science of self-help and self-healing and emotional regulation. So everybody should go and check that out.
Where can I buy it?
Yeah. Amazon and all major bookstores, but obviously Amazon is the easiest place.
Easiest.
And what's it called again?
Barnes and Noble also. It's called Work in Progress: The Road to Empowerment, The Journey Through Shame.
Beautiful. It's, and I'm not saying this because she's my friend. It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. She made me wait in between chapters because she had to write them. Oh, so annoying. And I was like, when is the next one coming? Like now, it was like cliffhangers, but a lot of great lessons. Something you don't often see in I hate the title this way, but a self-help book is instead of just like platitudes, science-backed ideas of how certain feelings that we've all gone through for different reasons could actually help. So I find that to be a really great part. Dr. Brent, I know that people are going to want to reach out to you. I know they're going to want to talk to you. So what is the best way for us to put on these show notes for people to get a hold of you?
You bet. And, one of those follow-up conversation points and things people may want to reach out to me is, what is the actual way we can step into flow in the workplace? What's the step-by-step process? How do we get locked in so we could be more productive, more creative, learn quicker, so that we can achieve our most meaningful goals in life? And so I would love for people to reach out to me. The best place probably is just go to my website, Brent Hogarth, BrentHogarth.com. You're welcome to hit the link to schedule a free intake with me. Also on my website, I have my top 3 productivity hacks that people would probably want to download. Simple interventions. And that's what I'll just share in my clinical practice, but also in my executive coaching practice with leaders, managers, entrepreneurs around the world. My interventions, I think you might like this, Dr. Abbie, are very, very simple behavioral techniques. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about, how do you spend the first 5 seconds when you wake up and start your day? If we can just take one deep breath, become aware, so we're not just living life on autopilot, train our nervous system to be calm, the leverage that has throughout our day is immense. And so my work as a coach is really simple, helping people get clear on who they are at their best, and then stitching together tiny little habits that bring that to life consistently in their work. And so whether it's asking questions about the podcast, flow, mindfulness, wanting to learn more about my practice, please reach out, BrentHogarth.com. I'm on all the socials as well, but hit me up with the free intake and would love to have a follow-up chat with listeners as well as both of you.
Thank you so much. Really, honestly, this has been truly remarkable. And I know everyone listening out there, I know you got something great out of this because I could just feel it. So I hope you enjoyed it. And join us next month, which will be the very, very first podcast of 2025. And Abbie, do you know what you planned for it, or do I have to remind you?
Yeah, I think I planned one that isn't so welcoming for the new year. I think we're talking about bullying. I think actually I plan to put productivity.
No, it was procrastination.
As January. Yeah, productivity and procrastination, both one. That was my plan for January 1st, but I also did bullying. So maybe it will be a surprise.
It'll be a surprise. We don't know which one.
Or are you going to be motivated?
I mean, procrastination is a good topic because everyone supposedly makes new world.
But do we want to leave that for February so people continue their motivation?
I guess we'll have to. I guess you got to come back in January and find out what we do. Until then, stay safe, everyone. See you.